Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. The 94-year-old living legend Clint Eastwood, however, he has now created one item, crystal.evident. Some individuals he never desired close to his legacy, but not at his burial. First, let's talk about Tom Hanks. Hanks starred in Sully back in 2016. The actual account of the miracle on the Hudson Eastwood-directed drama that drew in more than $240 million globally on a $60 budget of millions. It received recognition from both fans and reviewers, and Hanks as delivered every time. However, behind the scenes, not everything went as planned. Hanks has shown how collaborating with Eastwood was more anxious than any dramatic moment or stunt. Additionally, for someone who has used planes collisions, conflicts, and desolate islands, which says a lot, that set was run by Clint Eastwood, like a man who didn't think that second chances, opportunities. No shouting, no mayhem, no holding hands. Rather, Clint provided guidance in whispers. Nothing to do, simply a gentle nod, without any cuts. That's enough of it. Hanks made the call, terrifying as hell. Eastwood, he said, acted as though players were horses, a practice that originated in Eastwood around the 1960s. Rawhide is a Western TV series. In the past, the filmmakers would shout "action" loudly, that horses would run away. Thus, Eastwood vowed never to do that again. He never altered. At first glance, it could appear to be quiet professionalism, but according to Hanks, it was more like silence, pressure. You had no idea when the camera began to roll. You were unsure of what you just performed was sufficient. You simply continued until Eastwood muttered, "That's sufficient." Additionally, when you have Eastwood's cold stare, observing everything you do, even a two-time Oscar winner, the move begins to perspire. Hanks acknowledged that he avoided making any eye contact because of fear. That one incorrect glance may get him that the well-known Eastwood squint, which didn't require words to break your heart. Assurance. However, this is where it actually becomes uncomfortable. Tom Hanks may have praised and grinned on the red carpet, Clint on press trips. However, when he listened to talk shows, particularly the Graham Jimmy Kimmel Live and the Norton Show, the truth got out. Eastwood, he said, acted as though they were cowboys or broncos, attempting to manage a stampede. Additionally, when he made fun of it in front of millions of watching audience, it didn't land as playful. It had the sound of a caution. It sounded like annoyance, pent up and then let out. Clint Eastwood took note. He isn't the type of man to make a public statement, but people told those close to him that he wasn't pleased with Hanks' portrayal of him. Eastwood is very private and quite pleased with his style of direction. He is a control freak. Self-control and stoicism, not Hollywood drama, but grievances. Thus, when a well-known celebrity like Hank began to voice those silent complaints, it hurt Clint's feelings. And insiders claim that it left a mark. For that reason, Eastwood doesn't simply ignore the animosity. He's had conflicts previously. He's satisfied for some, while for others, he's interred. However, when someone crosses an unwritten rule, particularly on respect, Clint recalls, Hanks also crossed that line, not by going straight after him, but by disparaging his strategies, by transforming his into late-night chit-chat. Additionally, that's something that Eastwood doesn't forget. Not when you're 84, 90, or even 94. Thus, when he discusses the individual's Tom, he doesn't want to attend his burial. One of the names that keeps coming up is Hanks appearing, and if another name exists, Leonardo is on that unsaid list. DiCaprio. J. Edgar's theatrical debut in 2011 appeared to be a serious Oscar candidate. Clint Eastwood is the director, starring DiCaprio. Academy wrote the script. Dustin Lance Black won an award. On paper, it ought to have been enormous. However, the stillness was what many didn't notice. As the strain behind the camera increases, the sort that doesn't appear in tabloids, yet still causes scarring. This was the Eastwood and DiCaprio's sole collaboration, collectively. Additionally, given what transpired on that set, it's likely to remain in that manner. This is what transpired. The J. Edgar had a very small budget, just $35 million for a 5-hour biopic. Decades and changes a one actor by aging for decades is extremely snug. Warner Brothers had no intention of despite Eastwood's presence in the chair of the director. Thus, DiCaprio something startling. He took out his regular $20 millions of dollars in salary reduced to barely $2 million, a 90% reduction in compensation. Just that demonstrates his dedication to the undertaking. He thought the story was true. He thought the persona was real, but, as it happens, comfort is not synonymous with believing. Eastwood provided his signature style of direction, fashion to the set, quick, quiet, and with no space for a redo. If you're accustomed to lengthy rehearsals, numerous takes, and Clint's director-actor partnership sets have the feel of a manufacturing floor, you avoid warm-ups. You remain cold. Words. Go, he says, with hardly a whisper, silently observes, and then, enough of that, mutters. One shot, no second chances. For some, that works. Actors. DiCaprio, however, who tosses himself into each and every detail as if whiplash of creativity. It also didn't help. Judi Dench, the actress who starred in the movie, affirmed that Eastwood's strategy confounded even seasoned actors. She claimed that there were times when Clint didn't even make a take announcement. Once, while waiting, she conversed with DiCaprio to begin the actual sequence, only to be later informed that it was finished. Additionally, when Clint closed it, when Leo requested to go again, the day is over. That level of authority may help keep spending down, but it also puts an end to cooperation. Additionally, for DiCaprio, for example, who constructs rapport with filmmakers such as Scorsese, that's an agreement between Nolan and Tarantino to break acre. Next came the actual toll. DiCaprio spent hours each day sitting, gonna grow up and become J. Edgar Hoover, prosthetic noses, skull caps, and fake teeth makeup for aging. He moved, spoke, and occasionally, for 12 hours, breathing like Hoover hours in a row. He exerted a lot of effort into the position. However, what caught him off guard was going to get out of hand. Clint had no desire for layering. He desired speed, obtain enter, exit, and finish. Consequently, Leo felt as though he were the lead in a film, was unable to steer. Things became more bizarre. Behind the scenes as well, Clint himself did the fight choreography for the Armie Hammer and DiCaprio, not only controlling it, acting it out physically, rolling over on the ground with his lifelong companion Buddy Van Horn, 81, a stunt partner years old. He gave Leo what he desired. It's finished. No conversation, just a protest and a silent nod. Hammer afterwards, it was described as impressive. However, Leo, he remained silent, and that indicates everything. Following the conclusion of the shoot, there was no comeback or second project. No reunion, no call. Additionally, for a man like DiCaprio, who frequently creates powerful collaborating relationships with directors, that speaks for itself. He has produced 5 movies with Tarantino, 2 with Scorsese, but it was J. Edgar, and Clint only had 1. Leo didn't conceal anything, even when on press trips, his endeavor, but he didn't rejoice either. It was working with Clint. Sources claim that behind closed doors, he felt suppressed. The movie's earnings at theaters supported the feeling. It brought in $84 million worldwide. Not amazing, but solid. Not particularly for a movie with 2 titans such as DiCaprio and Eastwood taking the lead. And ever since, Leo's, the schedule is full of everyone except Clint. Additionally, as Eastwood moves into he is drawing the last chapter of his life. Lines. He dislikes the drama of show business, his heritage. Quiet respect is what he desires. He prefers those who didn't simply cash, look for cameras or smile. He desires those who witnessed him, comprehended him, and appreciated the manner in which he worked, even when it wasn't simple. Therefore, when he leaves, DiCaprio is expected to deliver a floral wreath, since Clint is opposed to it, not from someone who provided him with a single film and left. Also, If you believe that's when the list comes to a conclusion, listen. Regarding Spike Lee, this dispute was made public. Hit can make the news and eventually became so hot that Steven Spielberg had to intervene himself. Clint Eastwood directed back in 2006. Our Father's Flags and Letters from two war dramas that tell the same story, Metallic from several perspectives. The movie captured the memorable event during World War II. 5 Marines, 6 soldiers, and the American was reared by a Navy corpsman flag at Uema. The second movie flipped the lens, displaying the Japanese viewpoint. Letters won 4 Oscars nominations for Best Director, among others. The majority of commentators referred to it as the superior of the pair. Spike Lee, however, was unimpressed. Anyway, as he promoted his 2008 the movie Miracle at St. Anna during World War II, he criticized Clint for deleting black soldiers from the narrative. Lee noted that around 1 million men and women of African American descent served in Wu was on Uema with those black Marines, but they weren't seen in Clint's movies, nothedly at all, in Letters and once in Our Father's Flags, aside from a brief one black soldier's background being taken away. At that point, the conflict blew up. Eastwood retaliated by saying his film focused on the precise men who, the flag was, raised in Joe Rosenthal's well-known image, and those 6 guys were white. He wanted to tell that story. Tell me. He maintained that include black, the characters would have been historically false. However, he went one step farther, advising Lee to cover his face. And it was at that point when things truly took a turn. Lee refused to give up. He gave a clap, returning, letting everyone know that he wasn't making up history. Black troops suffered, bled, and lost their lives in the battle, and Hollywood has disregarded that fact for decades. Flags of Our Fathers, to Lee, was really another sanitizing movie. Reality to conform to a limited, white-centered story. He didn't believe, although Clint was prejudiced, he was unquestionably believed he was disconnected. Additionally, he failed to see the issue. He indicated Bird, his jazz icon biography from 1988 Charlie Parker, as evidence that he comprehended dark tales. Forrest starred in that movie. Whitaker, with an almost all-black cast. That was equilibrium to Clint. However, it wasn't the point, Spike. This wasn't about a single movie. It concerned decades of erasing. The verbal battle dragged on. It garnered media attention in The Protector. On ABC News, it was echoed. Additionally, as both directors remained firm, the tension continued to increase. Lee gave Clint a call, and Old Man, furious. Clint brushed Lee aside as a person who was unaware of how history functions. There was an impasse between 2 generations, 2 perspectives on narrative, and 2 entirely distinct perspectives on the world. Then arrived Spielberg. Steven Spielberg had created Our Father's Flags and Letters from Uema. Additionally, he was buddies with Spike Lee. When the conflict reached a climax, Spielberg moved stealthily to the rear of the scenes. No public appearances or press conferences, towers of apologies. Only private calls, private discussions, and private diplomacy. And it sort of worked. Lee ultimately sent Clint one of his later movies for an exclusive viewing, not because they fixed the problem, but since Spielberg mediated a settlement. However, despite that, they never became intercompanions. They never worked together. They never discussed each other in public, once more. Additionally, based on those close to that battle left an imprint on Eastwood, not due to the dispute, not because of the disdain. Clint is a man who constructs walls enclosing fidelity. You disagree with him, but if you confront him about the world, he never forgets. Thus, Spike Lee's name carries a lot of weight. Clint's list of contacts at his burial. Politics isn't the reason, but due to what Clint considers to be public disrespect. After dragging him into a battle while being filmed, there's no turning. Furthermore, if that line is sharp, it's set in stone with Spike when it reaches Michael Moore. Clint and Moore's conflict is more than just artistic disputes. It is intimate, it's furious, and it never subsided. The initial altercation took place in 2005 at the dinner for the National Board of Review Awards. Before an audience of Hollywood names, Clint said something concerning Moore that is still relevant 20 years later. According to Moore, Clint told everyone in the room that should Moore ever visit his home, he would take a camera and shoot him. Not figuratively, not in jest, but with genuine intention. Moore claims that Clint didn't snicker, chuckle, or smile. Go back down. After saying that, he said that intended it. Moore at the time had just Bowling Was Wrapped for Colleen, AA documentary that addressed the issue of gun violence and famously demonstrated his ambush. The NRA's president at the time, Charlton H. in his own house on video. H was fighting Alzheimer's. Clint considered it was a slight. That instance turned into the trigger. Clint's fuse was ignited by it, never really left the house. After several years, Eastwood reiterated that in 2015 evening. When Q performed live at Cineaconin, he tried to soften the story about Las Vegas. I didn't really threaten, he said, Moore's existence, but he went on to say that the idea wasn't all that horrible. That sentence, laughing nervously, they landed, but no one I forgot. Due to the fact that when Clint Eastwood talks about refusing to back down, he means it. Additionally, when someone crosses, he draws a second line in concrete. Moore gave a lengthy Facebook response. Post. He claimed that at the time he laughed because he was unwilling to stir farther difficulties, but he said that Clint disliked the laughter of the crowd, that Clint repeated it with more vigor. Moore claims that Eastwood made it evident that it wasn't a joke and that individual. The conflict intensified once more in when Clint released American in 2014 Sniper. The movie became the most year's highest-grossing domestic release, generating more than $547 million worldwide. It was tough, nationalistic, and focused on Chris Kyle, sniper for the Navy SEALs. However, Moore referred to the movie as harmful. He stated it changed the course of history. He summoned snipers, cowards. That one word sparked a backlash. Veterans, celebrities, and supporters gathered to stand up for Eastwood and Clint and Kyle. He said very little, although, according to people close to him, he was enraged. By that time, Eastwood and Moore were opposed to each other in every way, not only movies, but also culture, ideas, and nation. Moore established his reputation by difficult systems. Clint constructed his own by holding fast to them. Additionally, when Clint saw the American Sniper and took aim, it as something more than a criticism. He perceived it as an assault. Because of this, their conflict never agreed upon. There was no discussion of peace, no "I apologize." Clint has consistently said that he thinks in property rights and individual liberty. Additionally, if someone like Moore appears, unwelcome, particularly when a movie crew is present, Clint thinks he's entitled to safeguard his own space. That sort of Moore's thinking doesn't match with activism, and that's where it all starts. Moore maintained the feud over decades, with nuanced insults. He mentioned that, the moment in 2005 when American Sniper made news, he brought up the dangers. He issued a hate speech warning. Clint didn't attempt to fan the. He never disputed the resentment, anger. He leave it alone. For this reason, you won't observe Michael Moore in the vicinity of Clint's last chapter. Not at the monument, not in the press articles, but in the tributes discussing his legacy. Next, there is Wayne John. For many years, admirers of Hollywood posed the identical query. Why didn't two among the most well-known figures in Western history ever make an appearance together in a movie? The ego isn't the only answer. It's intimate. It has to do with mortality, ideals, and power, of a time of greatness when neither man could give up. You believe that this was only a conflict between the actors? No, this was a full-fledged Cold War in the movies, and the early 1970s saw the beginning of it all with a mail rather than a call or meeting. A message so sour that it put an end to everything, prospects of harmony amongst them. Returning to Clint Eastwood's explosion in the 1960s fame, with Dollars by Sergio Leone, 1964. The trilogy A Fistful of Dollars in 1965, For a Few Dollars More, and The Ugly, the Bad, and the Good in 1966. The Western was altered by these films, genre indefinitely. The tidy and law-abiding, the cowboy had passed away. The anti-hero in Eastwood was frigid, quiet, gritted, and morally ambiguous. That was a clear jab at all that John Wayne was known for. Wayne, already a titan of Hollywood since his Stagecoach innovation, in 1939, had based his reputation on bravery, patriotism, and unmistakable excellent men. He served as a metaphor of traditional America. Eastwood, 25, was destroying that emblem when he was years younger, down with each dusty battle and poncho stained with blood. Additionally, By Things reached a breaking point in 1973. That Eastwood published High Plains that year. Drifter, who directed for the second time, and already it was a daring move. The film featured an unnamed drifter named Eastwood, employed to protect them by a scared town against criminals. However, rather of being an honorable guardian, Eastwood's persona is aggressive, vindictive, and threatening in his independent. His name is painted on a coffin. He gives the town the new moniker Hell. This was the genre's worst iteration, sarcastic, twisted, and gloomy. Additionally, John Wayne detested it. Wayne saw the film and didn't remain silent. He dispatched Eastwood a letter, handwritten. It wasn't nice, it wasn't courteous. He informed Eastwood that the movie was unrelated to the American West's pioneers, that it was inconsiderate of the past and those who founded the nation. However, what Wayne did not explicitly state, what Eastwood something else, was undoubtedly heard. Child, stay in your lane. However, Clint Eastwood remained unflinching. Later, he said, the film was never intended to be practical. It was a Western fable, myth. He wasn't attempting to demonstrate hours of, he called it, pioneering drudgery. He was displaying a darker aspect. Additionally, that was precisely what Wayne was unable to stand. This is where things start to go crazy. During this period, Eastwood was collaborating on a project with director Larry Cohen-Diva known as The Hostiles, a movie that a young gambler would be the star. Eastwood, as well as John Wayne, an elderly cowboy character. It was an opportunity to introduce both icons into just one story. Eastwood found the script appealing. Hep presented it to Wayne. Wayne perused it. He didn't simply refuse. He ruined it, literally. When Eastwood made one more attempt time, forwarding an updated draft, Wayne's Mike, his own son, gave him the script while sailing. Wayne whispered as he examined it, "This bit of shasty tea once more," and flung it straight into the sea. That was the final instance. Eastwood made an effort to cooperate with him. Merely the rejection was the last straw. It was Wayne's public rejection of it, as well as individually. He announced that he did not consider Clint Eastwood's idea to be legitimate. These darker westerns, he believed, had contaminated the genre, and he couldn't bear Eastwood's